have Steve Smoot. He's my friend, and I've worked with Steve for a lot of years, and I'm really happy to serve on the board with. He's a great leader. He's got a great vision, and he's able to transmit that vision up to the people that make the final decisions and get kind of what he wants, which is kind of cool. He's the vice president of the South region here at Huron Health, and it's a huge undertaking. And every time I look around, they're adding more bites for him because he's got a big mouth and he can take a lot of bites. And so we're adding more and more for him to do. And so we asked Steve to come today, and Scott's here. He's regional planning. He's very helpful for all of us here to look at community needs and what's best for all of us here. And I found them to be very honest, wonderful people to work with. And today they're going to talk about the Spanish Fork Hospital that's coming, we hope. And he's going to tell you all the kind of relative timelines of what's going to happen. And I don't think they've actually got a plot of what it's going to look like, but they know where it's going to be and what its plan is for the future of the state of Utah. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Well, let me first of all just introduce myself just a little bit more. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I'm actually had been a member of Rotary for 8 years when I was in Cedar City, and was part of the Provo Rotary for about the first 2 or 3 years when I moved up here, until I ended up with some accountabilities at the Chamber, for Utah Valley Chamber, that I had to decide where to invest my time. And so I've taken a bit of a hiatus from Rotary right now. I am a Paul Harris Fellow, and so I'm very loyal to what Rotary is all about, especially being in healthcare. Love the passion around eradicating polio. I can't imagine a more noble cause for an organization to be a part of. So it's a great honor and privilege for me to be here with you today. And when I had the invite, was really excited and looking for more and more opportunities to interact with Spanish Fork. I'm originally from Utah County. I grew up in Orem, but my roots are very, very deep. For those of you familiar with BYU, the A.O. Smoot building is named after my great-great-great-grandfather. And he was sent by Brigham Young to Utah County, built the tabernacle where the temple, the LDS temple, is going to be built, and then did a lot of work. He was the chair over Brigham Young University and kind of helped save it from its demise when it burnt down, and there's a whole great story there. So really excited to be back. But for Spanish Fork, my greater claim to fame, I hope, I think they're a great family, is the Steve Wilson family. Most of you will recognize that name. Ran the State Farm Agency, turned it over to his son. One of Steve's older sons, Jason Wilson, came to work with me nearly 14 years ago, right out of graduate school, and worked with me as an assistant administrator in Cedar City, and then took my place and has been down there for 7 years. And you can appreciate with these jobs, Jason is like a brother to me, and so he loves the area of Spanish Fork, and we used to come and visit his family ranch and visit his family all the time. So I just have such fond feelings for this community, and excited that we have an opportunity to be a part of you in a greater way. So let me walk you through. If I can, I want to give you a little bit of a background. And we're a small enough group. Please interrupt me at any point and ask me any questions. And then I also, Tracy, just wanted to make sure timelines wrap up by about 1 if I can. Okay, perfect. So I want to introduce you to Intermountain Healthcare. And to start with, I think most may know our origins, but we always like to make sure people remember, because we all owe a debt of gratitude to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, regardless of what religion you're a part of. Like most religious organizations, in about the 70s, they realized that healthcare was becoming more and more complex, and that it wasn't core to the mission of a religious organization like it used to be at the turn of the century, when it had a different approach. And so the church had a decision to make, whether they divest and sell these hospitals, which they had individuals offer significant sums to turn these into for-profit facilities around the state, or they could give them over to the communities and create a not-for-profit organization called Intermountain Healthcare. And obviously, I wouldn't be here telling you the story if that's not the choice that they made. So they hired a couple of young executives, Scott Parker and Dave Jepson, and here we are over 40 years later, continuing to go on. Well, they were given 2 directions by the LDS Church. First of all, they said, we want you to become a model system. And And you have to think about that. We're in the 70s. People didn't even know where Utah was, right, around the country. And they're asking them to be a system that would be respected worldwide. And then the other piece is that we made sure and looked out not only for the big urban markets, but that we watch out for the rural communities and that healthcare would be provided to those rural communities, because the church had kind of created a lot of these areas, Stampede, Delta, Fillmore, and all those areas. And so that's been a passion for us, is to make sure we continue to meet the needs of those rural communities around. So on the model healthcare system, how have we done? If you'll allow me to toot our horns just a little bit on behalf, if you watched the presidential debate last time, it doesn't matter your political affiliations, because both Governor Romney and President Obama quoted and said we need to have healthcare improved. We need to have it fixed, and if the country could do it, they would do it like systems, and they named off 2 or 3. One of them was Intermountain Healthcare that they named. Well, we were pretty proud of that, as you can appreciate. So inside Utah, sometimes we're not always as recognized as we are outside for a lot of the great work we're doing. And it's not just Intermountain Healthcare, it's the amazing physicians that work with us, and we recognize that. And Dr. Franson's a great example of the kind of engagement. You may not appreciate this, but we give pretty serious goals to physician groups to deliver on some primary care statistics and some things that will make healthcare better for you. The #1 clinic in the state of Utah is Canyon View. Do you guys know that? Yeah, give them a round of applause. I'm not misquoting that, right? So I know Select Health.
That is correct.
Okay, a lot of details around that. These guys have done amazing, amazing work, and that's the type of partnerships that we need to have and that we hope to continue to embrace as we go forward. So Intermountain Healthcare in general, 22 hospitals. Our region, as we talked about right now, are the 3 hospitals in Utah County, and then the 4 hospitals in the rural areas to the south of us. 1,400 physicians that we work with. That means they have privileges on our staff, and 4,500 employees. We always tend to be one of the larger employers just because it takes a lot to deliver healthcare in a hospital setting. We just recently went through and changed our mission. Historically, it was a focus really more just on internally focused inside the hospital of delivering high quality care at the lowest appropriate cost. We haven't lost that vision, but if you pause and you think about Intermountain Healthcare, who owns this? Does anyone want to take a stab? Who are the owners of Intermountain Healthcare? It used to be the church, but they divested, and so who really owns this? Yeah, exactly, the community. Anyone that may use our resources, they are the owners of Intermountain Healthcare, right? And so what do patients want? Well, they want high quality care. We know that. All of us, when we get sick and we go, we want to make sure we're going to get the best quality care. But we want to make sure that it's absolutely affordable as possible. Well, there's things we can do to focus on it, but as we've looked at the problem, and unfortunately healthcare is a problem around the country, it potentially could bankrupt the country, we've realized that reducing utilization is the best way to fix that problem. The best way we do that is to keep all of us healthy. So this is counterintuitive. When you think about our business of taking care of sick people, we really want to keep you away from us. And so we're shifting our mission, and we're really focusing on how do we help people live the healthiest lives possible. And that's a mission that all of us can embrace and be excited about. And we think you, as owners of our organization, would demand that. You know, how do we make sure that we really are helping people live the healthiest life possible? And that means keep you out, but then when you come in, how do we minimize the effect on you and your family? Here's again in our county, and this will start getting in now, drilling into what we're doing with the facility. So any questions on Intermountain Healthcare in general before I move on? Okay, and bring those up as we go. So we have the 3 hospitals. You can see how they're located: North County, Orem, and Utah Valley. Big blank spot down here in the south end of the county. All of you are well aware of the fact that you've got a wonderful hospital with Mountain View Hospital in Payson, and then Timpanogos Hospital in Orem up here. And then the new addition, which opens up this summer, is an IASIS hospital up in Lehigh, right up around. And if you haven't seen, there's a hospital. If you look on the right-hand side right before you get to Thanksgiving Point, you'll see a big building under construction. That's the IASIS hospital that is opening up there. Utah Valley right now, we just finished I didn't have this slide up, but I do want you to know we just finished a fairly big addition and renovation of the American Fork Hospital to help have it ready for going out in the future. I'm going to show you a picture of that because it has applicability to Spanish Fork. So we're pretty excited about what we've done there. But now what we're working on is Utah Valley Regional. And we want to make sure, some people will say, well, gosh, Utah Valley Regional is expanding. The reality is the utilization of healthcare is going down, and it should. So what you used to go to the hospital for, you just don't go. The most crazy example of that is, to have your cataract surgery done. And Tracy, you're going to correct me, but I've heard lots of stories that you used to almost stay in the hospital for a week and have sandbags under your eyes, and it was a pretty serious operation. It takes less than an hour now. It's done in an outpatient setting. Well, those types of things happen every year, and more people leave the hospitals and go into less expensive settings to get this stuff done, and we encourage that and want to see that happen. But what happens as well is our population grows. So if we had to have the kind of hospital, if we could deliver hospital care the way we did 20 years ago, you'd have 2 or 3 Utah Valley regionals around Utah Valley, but we don't need that. So we're not expanding, and that's important to know. We're rebuilding because it's time for us to replace most of the beds. And if you've ever been and visited someone up in our tower, you'll know how outdated that building is. Well, we can even live with smaller, outdated rooms, but the bigger issue is the building's getting old. And you have to think about it like a high mileage car, because we use these buildings 24/7, they're constantly running, and we've got to come in and replace that tower. So we're under a significant project. It's already started, but it officially has the groundbreaking for the tower this summer. This is how it will lay out if you know the area. This is Bulldog Boulevard that goes right up to BYU, and this is the 5th West Central Utah Clinic. If you visited the specialist there, is right here across the street. And that's where our original tower that the LDS Church built existed, and it will come down and we'll have a nice big common area in the middle, and we'll build here. We purchased a neighborhood to the south, and that will give us the ability to build here on the parking. Now, let me just show you a few quick pictures. This shows you another version of it, and I want to pause because I just talked about the fact that you are all owners of Intermountain Healthcare. And I'm always sensitive, and I've been asked this question, my gosh, how do you throw away an old building? And I have to tell you, we agonized, almost spent 3 years studying this to see, is there a way for us to avoid tearing down or throwing away an old building? Is there a way for us to avoid expanding into this neighborhood to the south? Because I feel a huge accountability, and Kurt expects me to be a good fiscal steward of your resources, that I'm careful with the dollars that we get that I believe are somewhat sacred funds that come from a patient. And I can tell you without getting into a huge story that this is the most economical model that we could build. The codes have changed so much that for us to start to renovate the old building, we would spend more money fixing up that high mileage car, right? We've all had to face this decision, than to just go get a new car. And that's what we finally realized we had to do here. So this is the picture of Utah Valley Regional. By the time it's done, that will be quite a symbol in the center of Provo, which was not our goal, but what we had to do to take advantage. We've had to build up because we don't have a whole lot of land. In fact, we'll talk about acreage at the Spanish Fork site. This is all being built on about a 20-acre parcel of property. We've picked up another 10 or so for parking. To put that into context, the IMED campus in Salt Lake, because we could start from scratch, we have 100 acres at that spot. Riverton is 60, I believe, which is a small hospital. And how much does it have, Scott? About 35?
Yeah.
And what did we buy here in Spanish Fork?
Well, we originally bought, I think it was
40, and we've bumped that up now to 50. So you can appreciate that's part of why this is all towering up, is because land is tight, and that's what happens in urban areas. So we're pretty excited about this project. Again, it will break ground officially this summer, and it will take us 3 years. We'll be under construction for 3 years, so we won't even get to use that building until the year 2018. Pretty excited about that. Let me just tell you a couple of things about this that will impact the Spanish Fork Hospital as well. We are trying to learn from our experience and from the best minds from around the country to make sure that we're building this hospital to be here for the next 50 years. I talked about how healthcare is changing, and what you'll see is the very, very sickest will likely be in hospitals for short stays. Every one of these beds is being built exactly the same, with the ability to convert to an ICU. So as patients get sicker and you may need more ICU beds, they can convert and flex back and forth. It gives us the ultimate flexibility as we look into the future. They're also being built to be operationally effective for nursing staff. They're all identical. They're all right-sided. They're all done in such a way that if a nurse has been working, and this happens a lot in our hospital, someone will be working up on neuro shock trauma or up on the ortho neural floor, and then they go down to neuro shock trauma. It's a pretty radical difference between the units right now, and they have to get reoriented about where are the linens, where are the meds, how do I chart on this floor, and all those things. That's all been eliminated in this hospital. We'll continue to do that with all new hospitals that we build to make sure it's a good experience for the nursing staff and the physicians as they work inside the hospital. So I think that's all I have on Utah Valley. This would be the main entrance coming in. So any questions on Utah Valley Regional? And then I'll shift to Spanish Fork. Yeah.
The physician's plaza on the east of the building, it looked like that was going away. Is that
It's
also?
not. Good question. That's a very Provo specific question. Thank you. He's coming from Provo. He's my good friend from Central Utah, now at Canyon View Clinic. So this is actually where it is. So the big change will happen for those that have been there is there used to be a connector right there that came into the tower. We do have to eliminate that connector. So that is, and we're also historically, this is more detail than you probably want, but we had that building on a long-term land lease, like a 100-year lease. Funny thing, and we're selling that property to the physicians just so they have outright ownership of that building. Ironically, we own about a fifth of it anyway, so we're one of the owners of that building, so we're selling part of it to ourselves. Any other questions about?
And there's also a new outpatient building going there.
This one right here, so that'll house cancer services, rehab services on about first 2 or 3 floors, and then on the upper floors we'll consolidate where we have in any of our employed positions, so neonatologists, MFMs, which is a high-end OBGYN, a specialist for OBGYN, our cardiovascular surgeons, a lot of those physicians that are scattered all over the campus will consolidate up into that building for better functionality. And that'll have a connection right into the hospital through there so that they don't have to go outside to get it. But right now they do. We've got them all over the place. So good question. I had another question right here.
We still have valet parking?
We will always have valet parking. Yeah, absolutely. And it's free, and you do not tip them. And if they ask for tips, tell me, because they're not supposed to. So, and valet parking, that's when you always worry people will see that as, boy, that seems exorbitant for a hospital to have. But there are just situations when it's absolutely critical, and we realized that some years ago that that's a service we've got to provide in tough situations. If you've ever heard Brian Regan, he's a comedian, talks about going to the ER and he's dying, and he goes, "No valet parking, greatest oversight ever," right? And that's kind of the concept here, is to help them out. And then we obviously, the types of patients that come in here more and more with the higher acute services are the frail and elderly, and sometimes navigating our parking garage and the distances they have to walk are just too great. And so that's a service we've provided and we'll continue to do. Great question. That's a good thing, right? I probably should, I sat there selling it. It's a good thing, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I need to listen. So, any other questions about Utah Valley? Okay, well, let's shift to the South County. And I'm probably going to tell you things that you already know before I dive into this information. But I think it's awesome to celebrate what's happening to Utah County in general and the impact that that will have on South County and help you understand what is driving us to the decision to want to come in to your community and build a hospital. Now, I have to throw this caveat, especially since I'm on TV, so it's all recorded. This is not I could never make an official announcement that, boy, it is happening for sure, right? Because we have a board that represents all of you. Again, you're the owners. There's a board of non-paid volunteers that make final decisions on this. And so there'll be a decision-making process that takes place. And I'll explain that a little bit as we go. But we're definitely progressing very nicely along the path to where we would build this hospital. So let's jump in and talk through what's going on in the south end of the county. First of all, almost 1 out of every 4 Utah County residents lives in the Springville area south. And that's how we've defined South County. So Springville South, it's a near 128,000 residents. And you're experiencing a pretty fast growth rate. You can see that it happened over 2000 to 2010, and it will continue to happen into the future. And you can see this is our projection of what we see going into the future. So think about that area, Springville South. That's your line right there in the blue. This is the North County, which has been another fast-growing part of the county, and then West has been the area everyone always talks about right now. Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, all that kind of stuff seems to have the cachet in our county, but the reality is your area is the area to pay attention to, because pretty quickly that's going to be the predominant population in Utah County, and I think that's just awesome. I used to wonder, I said, now why was that going to happen when I first moved here? I questioned the governor's numbers. But if you look at what's happening, all of the high-tech industry, all those types of jobs have moved right to the point of the mountain. So I live kind of more that way, and that is just getting developed like crazy. Well, the cost of housing continues to go up. So for those employees that want affordable housing, they're going to be coming down here. And that only means property values are going to go up as well, but maybe more reasonable than what we're seeing in Alpine Highland area. So we're really excited about that kind of growth. Is it any, and this comes from the governor's data, but would everyone agree with this premise? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next piece then, so by 2030 we see 250,000 people just in this part of the county, which is basically the Provo-Orem area right now. And by the way, Provo-Orem, pretty stagnant growth. There's not a lot of land left to build on. They've built out a lot by the lake. They've got the Geneva Still property, which is technically not Orem, it's vineyard, but not a lot of opportunities. You'll see more growth upwards than out in that part of the market. So a lot of the growth, that's the other thing that will push to the south. Just more data on the ads, so you can see the south, what we see from 2015 to 2030. Look at that chunk. And if any of you have worked with the county, again, they obsess about this part right here. And this is really the thing to pay attention to, is your part of the county. Pretty exciting stuff. And then the other piece for us is Select Health. I'll tell you 2 things about Select Health. I think most of you know that's the insurance product that Intermountain Healthcare has. When I talked about Canyon View Clinic being #1, it's actually Select Health that expects and measures them on this data. And we sell it. Now our hands are tied a little selling the product here in the south end of the county. And I have a lot of my own employees on Select Health that live down here. In fact, I'd say at least half our employees live down in this part of the county. If they had a problem, a lot of times they have to travel a long distance for their hospital stay and their deliveries and all those kinds of things. And so it's problematic. But even with that issue, 25% or 27% of our Select Health membership in the county is right here in the south end of the county, and that's without a hospital down this way. So we know it's a popular product. We're going to make it really popular here in about a year because, again, you as owners, we feel, and especially as business owners, have really said we're sick of how fast healthcare is growing. You've got to figure out how to lock that in. We're taking the risk of the cost of healthcare insurance starting in 2016, and we're going to lock it in at about inflation. Inflation rates plus or minus 1%. It's been growing inflation plus 5 or 6%. So when we do that, we know that product will be popular. We're not going to be able to insure everybody, but that again will put pressure on the south end of the county, and it's going to drive the need for services down in this part of the world. Okay, so this just shows the various hospitals. We already had that map before, and this big hole right here in the middle where you guys are located. I think, I want to talk about something that may come up later, but let me make sure I hit it so I don't miss it. One of the things that we're incredibly sensitive to is we're not an organization, again, we don't have shareholders. I don't personally benefit if Intermountain Healthcare does better financially or not, right? We benefit back to the community by providing better resources, reducing our prices, whatever it is that we can do. So we also want to be good neighbors, and Mountain View Hospital has done an amazing job meeting the needs of this end of the county, and so we want to be sensitive. We need them to continue to do what they're doing, And we don't want to come prematurely and make it hard for them to do business. So we're timing the timing of when we come into Spanish Fork at a time when we think the population's grown enough that there's room for both. Does that make sense? So this is not a decision or a move on our part to try to do anything to compete or hurt Spanish Fork Hospital. And that's why I show this slide here on health plans. It's really, there's a big chunk of the population for us to take care of that's coming up to Utah Valley Regional right now. So this is the land originally that we had purchased, which was up here where the theater is and the old Food for Less and all of that. And we bought that, and we thought we were building a little bit sooner than maybe we were at the time, and we were working with the Spanish Fork leadership. I have a great relationship now with the current mayor, and we've always had good relationships. So we bought that land right there, just off of Highway 6, I don't know exactly where I am, I think north of here. But anyway, bought that land on Highway 6. And appropriately, Spanish Fork City came and they said, boy, that is really prime commercial property. And you can see the vision of what you all have had for this area. I mean, it's just exploding and it's exciting. And they said, you guys are going to be right there on the storefront. Do you really need that? Or could you survive if you were a little further back? And we said, and that's how we picked up more acreage. We said, we don't need that high-end storefront property. That's not really our vision. What we are always looking for.
It'll go away.
Is this your projector?
It's an old one of ours.
All right, I'm going to hold you accountable.
I planned this.
Anyway, we don't need storefront property. What we want, and you can see we haven't done a good job. Now, historically, we did a great job. You got to remember, and there's a lot of you in here that will remember, I-15, before it existed, the State Street Corridor was your path through the county. So Utah Valley Regional is in an absolutely perfect spot for the path on Utah County. AF Hospital was just right off of that path, but now the world has changed. And so obviously if we could just pick those buildings up, we'd plunk them right down, right on I-15. And we did that with our big facility at 53rd South in Salt Lake. And a lot of that is a lot of ambulance traffic and other things coming in. So that's really what we want, is we want accessibility to this I-15 and to Highway 6 for patients coming in. And so being right here, not so critical. Being near this, that's important. And so that's what we've done, is we've done a swap on land that I'm not the real estate guy, we give this up. So this involved, believe it or not, negotiations with land in St. George even, by the time this all got done. So all over the state, there's investors and people, and it all worked out, so we ended up with this plot of land down here. Now this isn't going to whet your appetite too much, because you're going to look at that and go, gosh, where's the hospital going to go? What's going to be in those services and all of that? And the reality is we don't really know yet. We just barely kind of got this land, and so our next step will be over this coming year, and that will be Scott's job, is for us to start to lay this out so that it works appropriately. We'll work with the city closely of how they're planning this, and we'll make sure we're maximizing the property. Likely independent affiliated physicians with ours will want to have clinic space nearby. We'll try to work through all those types of issues as we go forward. And then, so that, I'll talk about the hospital. Let me talk about a couple of things. One of the main things that we see happening at this hospital will continue to be deliveries. And I think most of you know that deliveries are a big part of what we do in Utah County. So my peers, we have the BYU effect, we call it, so, and big families. And so Utah Valley Regional is an example. If I looked at a hospital that had the mission of Utah Valley Regional, level 2 trauma center, open heart, neurosurgery, all of those high-end services, and I plunked it down into the middle of, let's say, Ohio, they would do about 20% of their business, maybe even 15% of their business would be OB related. So delivering babies, NICU, all that. At our hospital, it's a third. So 33% of what we do is delivering babies, which is part of why the Spanish Fork Hospital is so critical for us as well. This shows you where those births are coming from in the county. We can see the Spanish Fork area down here. So we're still at Traconezan, and those are births only going to our facilities. And so there's a significant population. And we're using the number of births as kind of the trigger. We need to have enough births, that we have enough, that the staff get enough experience that there's going to be no risk or no danger to anybody that comes into our hospital. And we can afford to provide the backup of C-sections and the various things that need to happen for those deliveries. And so that's what we're looking at right there. And those births continue to grow, and that we're pretty excited about that. So I talked about the Mountain Dew thing. We want to minimize the impact of Mountain Dew, and we really want to shift the load of Utah Valley Regional to Spanish Fork. And that's our vision of having appropriate services close to home. There's no need for somebody to come navigate. Now, if they want to come, some do. Some want to be next to the level 3 NICU. They're a little more nervous about that. Others are very comfortable delivering in a community hospital, and we know that based on the success of Orem Community Hospital. So our goal is to have that be closer to home and save that space at Utah Valley for some of those higher end services when we absolutely need it. And then the physician mix brought on, oh, this is a piece we've thought through with actually Mountain Dew as carefully as we can. And Tracy, you may have a different opinion on this, but I know historically it's been a little bit of a challenge to get, for instance, a general surgeon to come and actually really station themselves in the south end of the county and just really focus on this end of the county. They tend to migrate back up to Utah Valley Regional. We think having a Spanish Fork Hospital and Mountain Dew together, and it's because of payer mix, right? Different types of insurance is allowed. That will make it more palatable for a surgeon to really want to come in and make their practice between those two hospitals. Does that seem like a logical approach? So we think it actually strengthens both of the hospitals by having us come down into that market. And that would be our hope, that we could encourage that to happen over time. What would it look like? So this facility will start out a little bit smaller. Scott, I think we said 30, 40 beds to begin with. And probably the best model to think of is a more robust version of an Orem Community Hospital, if you've seen that. And I had some various pictures up here, but they were a little misleading and confusing, so I left pictures off. Other than what I did leave up here is this is the new American Fork campus at this point, because our vision is unlike Orem, that's kind of always going to be about the size that it is, because it's kind of wedged in between everything. We see Spanish Fork Hospital having the same path that American Fork Hospital had. So it starts out as an Orem community, a great facility for a family practice physician to practice in and take care of their needs. And it will continue to grow as the community grows and the need grows and you add various specialties. So if you think about an AF out into the future, it's got full orthopedic surgery coverage. It's got cardiologists providing services there, a lot of these higher end physicians. And we want to do that in Spanish Fork. We think that's what the community needs over time as we continue to grow. And so it will be constructed absolutely in the mindset of it will expand as the needs expand in the community and as the community continues to grow. So timeline, and then I think I'll wrap up with that and then take any additional questions we might have. So as I talked about, we're right now in the planning. How do we use the land? How do we work through it? How do we position on that? We preview that with Intermountain Central leadership, and then as that's approved, we will really begin planning with architects actually in 2016 with the concept of breaking ground in 2017 or 2018. And probably more towards 2018 is when you'll see us break ground with anticipated completion in 2020. Now, I know you're like, wow, that's 5 years, that's a long time. In my world, that's tomorrow. For us to get everything done that we need to, that really is tomorrow in 2020. What I'm really excited about, and I explained this to Kurt, we plan in 5-year increments for our hospitals. And the Spanish Fork Hospital, because of the economy, because of other factors that we were dealing with, it kept staying in year 5. So does that make sense? Every year I'd go present it, and they'd bump it out to year 5. And I would agree with the reasons why. It wasn't like anyone was doing anything inappropriate. But now it's starting to move forward every year. So we're much more optimistic. We're much more optimistic about the fact that every year we get closer to 2018, that becomes a pretty solid date. And our optimism and our confidence about the fact that that will be the date is pretty strong. Scott?